Godzilla X Kong comes out tomorrow, and I don't know about you guys, but I got my tickets. I'm gonna be there day one. But I'm a little sad at the same time because an old era of the Monsteverse is coming to an end. Because with GXK, we get new forms, new abilities, new weaponry. So overall, it's safe to say that the previous list of high tier titans is gonna be changed forever after tomorrow. So join me today as we'll rank the Monsteverse currently from weakest to strongest one last time before the events of GXK. So you won't find anything like Evolved Godzilla or like Shimu on the list. I intend on making a video totally dedicated to GXK in the future, but get this video to 1,000 likes and then I'll be sure to get that video out. But before that, I want to take the time to acknowledge today's newest sponsor, YouTubes. You guys might know them as the guys that make these really nice YouTube-esque figures, but they also have a wide variety of science fiction and figurines as well as merch based on intellectual properties. One of these properties being Godzilla. And with GXK coming to us tomorrow, this is the perfect time to get your merch. I know I did, as YouTubes were kind enough to send me out this very nice Godzilla plush. He came in this nice plastic and he's very big as well as soft. I can literally sleep with him. If you yourself find yourself interested in this product or any of their other Godzilla products, be sure to click the first link in the description and it'll take you right to their website. Thank you YouTubes for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back to our regular scheduled program. Alright, here's the thing about the MV. There's a lot of garbage in it. You have stuff like Ion Dragon that we're kind of doing decent at first until Godzilla got a hold of them. You know, really garbage stuff like that. War bats, anything on Skull Island, and honestly, I'm not even the biggest like knowledge guy in terms of the mid-end titans. You know, stuff like Behemoth, Methuselah, apparently it's expanded upon in Godzilla Dominion. I didn't read Godzilla Dominion, but luckily for you guys, I know someone who did. As Nick is a big super fan of the Monsterverse and he read everything pretty much. So I'm gonna slide the mic to him and I'll come back when we're talking about the monsters that people care about.
Hey guys, the ultimate life form is back. I know you all have missed me, so let's get into the Monsterverse tiering. So, starting with the standard mid-tiers, how strong are they? Well, not very. We know this because of Dominion. In Dominion, Godzilla is extremely weakened and extremely tired because this is after he's killed Ghidorah and he has not regenerated or eaten after the fact. So, it's said multiple times in the comic as well that he's extremely weak. And yet, he's able to defeat Scylla pretty swiftly to the point where she runs away pretty fast. And he walks in on a Moloch, easily defeating Behemoth, and yet he makes a Moloch submit instantly the second that he shoves him. So a Godzilla that's barely clinging to life is much stronger than the average mid-tier Titan. The rival is a Titan in Dominion that has been getting a bit more attention lately, so just how strong is he? Well, his feat is defeating Godzilla at some point in the distant past, but it's not really as clear-cut as he beats Godzilla, because the author has stated that this was a younger and less experienced Godzilla. And now I know what you're thinking, but humans are around to witness it. It couldn't have been that long ago. 200,000 years ago. It was a blip to him. And that's true, but at the very least, they meant that he was not as powerful as he is in modern day, which you can kind of easily assert to be true, because if Godzilla's plan in Dominion is to have a rematch with the rival and reclaim his home that was taken from him hundreds of thousands of years ago, but you can see Godzilla's thoughts all throughout this comic, and at the beginning of Dominion, he does not think that he can beat the rival in this state, where he's still extremely weakened and extremely tired. So throughout some of the earlier parts of the comic, he beats Scylla, he beats a Moloch, and he just swims around sharpening his spines on ice and stone and stuff like that. And then around the middle of the comic, he asserts that he is ready to fight the rival and thinks he can defeat him in the state he is in now. But the state he is in when he says he can beat the rival is still weakened. Right before Godzilla asserts he can win now, it still says that he is hungry, he is tired, he is not replenished. It's unlikely that Godzilla is simply overestimating himself either, because at the beginning of the comic, he said that he would lose to the rival, so that doesn't really tell me he's just ridiculously cocky in his own abilities. So obviously, he's the best source for what his power can match up against. And according to Godzilla himself, being weakened and tired just to a bit less of a degree than the start of Dominion is enough to handle the rival. So this is not really a bad thing, because when Godzilla said he could not beat the rival yet, he easily dealt with Scylla and a Moloch, so the rival should be stronger than the vast majority of mid-tier Titans that are around, but still far less powerful than Godzilla's peak, and less powerful than Main Kong as well, now for Tiamat. She's one of the tougher ones as well. She's actually the one who killed the rival before Godzilla even showed up. And in fairness to the rival, he was aging, so he was past his prime, but I doubt it would have mattered considering the lair was right next to a giant body of water. You know, I think he was cooked either way. But yeah, so Tiamat should be above the rival. And when Godzilla fights Tiamat underwater, his thoughts are actually that he's going to lose if they continue to fight underwater, so he brings her onto land where he easily defeats her. But beating a very weakened Godzilla underwater is still a good feat compared to every other Titan so far in this comic. So Tiamat is definitely one of the higher tier mid-end Titans. There's recently been some contention as to the timeline in the ancient era of the Monsteverse, and to be honest, there's no clear-cut answer because they love just not telling us when stuff happened, but we can make pretty accurate inferences with the comics, and the most likely timeline is that the first ancient event is the rival beating Godzilla, because if Godzilla was already the last of his kind in the Alpha when the rival beat him, then the rival would have become king of the monsters and all the other Titans would have been under his rule, but nothing really happened when Godzilla lost, he just left. So it's most likely that Dagon was still the Alpha of the Titans when Godzilla was beaten by the rival. And the next ancient event was most likely Muto Prime killing Dagon and just getting rid of him, going for the biggest source of radiation. Okay, I forgot that it's actually Dagon instead of Dagon now, but it's too late to correct it. I'm gonna leave this in the video. So, Godzilla took over after the death of Dagon as the Alpha of the Titans, essentially, and the only one left of his species. And then the last ancient event is the arrival of Ghidorah, where Godzilla fights him in Antarctica and puts him in ice, which solidifies him as the remaining Alpha for the next, hundreds of thousands of years. That should be all of the mid-tier Titans, so I'm afraid, my loyal subjects, that it's about time the ultimate life form takes his leave. Don't forget, soon the world will be mine and you will be there to see it happen.
Ugh. Sorry for that freak, everyone. I don't even know why I bring him on here. It's crazy because he was doing so well until then too. Well, anyways, despite that, I think he did a pretty decent job of laying everything out. Alright, but moving on to some of the relevant kaiju now, and we're gonna have to talk about some oddballs, because apparently the opening to GVK is considered canon verbatim out of Adam Wingard's mouth himself. Granted, there's a few minor inconsistencies such as weight and height, but seeing as how the main point of this is to establish this bracket, right, to set up Godzilla vs. Kong, I think that at the very least, the fighting part and the ranking system should be probably taken literal. I think Adam Wingard cares a lot more about, who would beat who in a fight than, talking about Godzilla's atomic breath output. But anyways, using this bracket, the Queen Muto is relative to Scylla, so I'd put her and Scylla above Amulek and Behemoth, but below the rival and Taima, as the Serpent and Ape have the best scaling to a Dominion Godzilla. It should also go without saying that the Mutos from 2014 would also go around the same category, probably unquantifiably lower than the Queen Muto. And yeah, I know, seemingly the Mutos have the best scaling to Godzilla out of most of these Titans, but once you consider the fact that Godzilla was likely rusty, and then stack that on the other fact that the Mutos were passively nerfing his radiation output, and by proxy his durability. As the more radiation Godzilla receives and has, the more durable he becomes. So that kind of negates any of the cutting or piercing scenes that they may have in the film, because it was just a weakened Godzilla. And he was still able to kill the male Muto with a single tail swipe and decapitate the female with a single weakened atomic breath. And if you want to use novels, I believe it says that he knocked her head off with a swipe or something like that. So, and there's also the fact that in lore, Godzilla, while not rusty, closer to a state when he probably fought Ghidorah, was shown to be able to take on multiple Mutos at once. And even Mothra and Rodan kind of see them as cannon fodder, going off the paintings from Godzilla King of Monsters. I also want to say that at the beginning of 2014, Godzilla had returned from hibernation, which is for the most part a state that weakens kaiju after just waking up, as Ghidorah and Muto Prime were both confirmed to be slightly weakened after hibernation. So yeah, that should wrap it up with the mid-end garbage Titans. But moving on to some of the upper echelons, like the above average Titans, I would have Methuselah as well as Rodan. Now granted, them scaling relative to each other kind of comes off of the GVK opening sequence, and the same sequence has Rodan and Methuselah above all the other mid-end Titans, so that's one reason why they'd be this high, but there's also the manner of feats. Rodan in lore, as previously established, was able to take on Muto, so that would put Rodan and Methuselah by extension above most of the garbage we talked about. And then Rodan was able to put up somewhat of a fight against Ghidorah. It's not a very good fight, don't get me wrong, But seeing as how the average Titan in this verse concede after like a single slap from like a logically weaker Godzilla than this Ghidorah, it's not really that bad. Rodan was also able to fight on slightly more equal footing with Mothra, even though yes, he was on the losing end of that fight as well, despite what the end of the fight might make you think. But yeah, what little lore implications as well as shown feats that Rodan has would probably be enough to put him above most of the other Titans we talked about. And Methuselah is just there chilling via this GVK opening sequence. Oh crap, I forgot about Kamata's. I mean, sorry to all 2 Kingdom Kong fans.
Now hold on. What's wrong with Kingdom Kong?
Well, for starters, Godzilla's not in it.
Normally I would agree with that, but Kingdom Kong is much better than most of the other spin-off comics, especially stuff like Godzilla Awakening.
Hey, no Godzilla Awakening slander on my channel.
What do you mean, your channel?
My channel. I'm the host. Goji-Chronic is right there.
Not anymore. I grow tired of your insolence! Be gone!
Wait, what?
Alright, now that Nimrod is out of my way, we can talk about Camazotz. Now, firstly, Camazotz is actually an Alpha Titan, and albeit obviously a lower end Alpha Titan, he's still an Alpha, and Kong defeating him is what labels him as an Alpha Titan himself, so him being in that tiering somewhat is consistent. Kong in Kingdom Kong is also stronger than he was in GVK, as Adam said that Kong was kind of out of shape, and has been aging a little bit weirdly since Skull Island was destroyed. So, in Kingdom Kong, Camazotz actually has the advantage over Kong for the majority of the comic, using his flight and his spikes and screeches to really get the better of him. And keep in mind, this is a stronger Kong than the one Godzilla fought. And Camazotz is also able to manipulate the energy of Ghidorah's storms, which is how he killed all of the Iwi tribe. The storms that Ghidorah left after he died stayed there for years until Camazotz was like, hey, what if I just use that? Like, on some real high-level thinking. With this high-level thinking, Camazotz is able to not only survive, but manipulate the energy of Ghidorah's storms. And while only a small percentage of Ghidorah's actual power, this is still a feat completely out of any range of the majority of Titans, which solidifies him as being a lower end alpha and makes it consistent. And he should be more powerful than Rodan, given the fact that he was able to defeat a stronger Kong, a prime Kong, well, prime until GXK, but a prime Kong at this point in time. So yeah, Camazotz is actually a pretty downplayed Titan in the Monsteverse, and just running this channel is so boring! I am the ultimate life form. I have no obligation to gift you fools with my higher level thinking, with my glorious voice, my glorious insight. I can't believe this clown used to do this every week. That's it.
What? Where was I?
Listen up. I've grown tired of running this channel, and I've brought you back to do it for me.
Okay.
Yes! And your first job as my minion is to finish my video. I have greater matters to attend to.
Alright, hopefully that freak is gone now. And with that, we can finally get into the top 6. And to start off, we have Mechagodzilla. And yeah, I know, I make fun of Mecha Fodder a lot, but when it comes to his stuff, he still has some decent things that should put him above most of the other Titans. And to be pretty honest with you guys, his anti-feats are only anti-feats for people who try to say that he's a top tier. So let's get into all the stuff he has for once. Godzilla starts the events of GVK at nearly full power, but not quite at full power. And by the end of his fight with Kong, or the start of the fight against Mechagodzilla, he's around 50% of whatever power he started with. Let's say that Godzilla started the events of the film around 90 or 85%, and that would mean that this Godzilla is around 40-ish% power. And despite Mechagodzilla losing the first clash of strength to this Godzilla, he would go on to ragdoll him, burn him, and even make him shout in pain, as well as potentially internally damage him. And he was able to beat this 40 to 50% Godzilla in an extended beam clash. And yeah, I know, the kiss of death due to Adam Wingard's statements might not have even killed Godzilla, but I mean, at least on a narrative level, it was implied that it was going to kill Godzilla at the time, and Wingard just said that he didn't know. But moving on to his anti-feats now, for the people who think he should be higher. Wingard has gone on record to state that most of Mechagodzilla's blows did nothing really substantial to Godzilla, and that he had no real means of critically injuring him, even going on to say that Godzilla's hind is impervious to any of Mechagodzilla's physical blows, hence why he resorts to attempting to hit him with the kiss of death. And as previously mentioned, Adam Wingard hints at the fact that it probably wouldn't even kill Godzilla. Also, he stated to be slower and less agile than a presumably 100% 100% Godzilla. Moving on to the beam clash now, and Godzilla and Mechagodzilla were actually equal for a minute. Mechagodzilla was at his base 100% and Godzilla was far weaker than his current base, and it was kind of a stalemate until Mechagodzilla had to pump more energy into the beam in order to overpower Godzilla. We can add on to this as Adam Wingard has stated that Mechagodzilla would have lost if Godzilla wasn't tired already. Also, he stated verbatim to be weaker than a 50% Kong. This is shown in the film as Kong can stagger and combo Mechagodzilla and even drop the mechanical menace with an axe that has no power in it. He's also able to hold back Mechagodzilla for a long period of time with a single hand, and most damning of all, Mechagodzilla is ripped to shreds by an axe powered by a weakened Godzilla's atomic breath. Keep in mind, Ghidorah, as well as Godzilla in the very same film, can endure either the atomic breath or weapons powered by stronger atomic breaths. So with all this in mind, he would still scale above a good amount of the Titans, but he has some pretty noticeable anti-feats that would stop him from being any higher than the next guys. Alright, in this next tier of power, we have Mothra and Kong. Both of these characters happen to be very downplayed in general MV inverse conversations, and I hope to bring light to their true metas with this video. And overall, I think these guys are very interchangeable, hence why I had them tied for this spot. And I'll tell you who I think wins, but let's start with Mothra. Mothra, for starters, is confirmed to be Godzilla's second in command, even having the title of Queen of the Monsters, which is upscale her off any of the Protector Titans that we see in the films. This would include Rodan, as Rodan is portrayed to have aided Godzilla and Mothra during the original battle against Ghidorah. This is consistent because via the King of the Monsters novelization, it's pretty much apparent that she was winning the fight against Rodan. The movie also shows this, but I will admit it's not as clear due to it mostly being in the background, with Rodan only getting the upper hand at the end due to Mothra's poor heat resistance, as the lava leaking out from Rodan's wings is what weakened her enough to get to that point. Despite this, she still managed to pull off a W. She also has scaling to Ghidorah, as some cave art depicts Mothra and Godzilla 2v1ing Ghidorah. And I mean, if you think Mothra was relevant in any way she performed during this battle, like if you think she could hurt Ghidorah or endure blows from this 100% base Ghidorah, then she would get some nice scaling via that. This scaling chain is consistent, as once again she was on the winning end against Rodan, the same Rodan who was able to box with the Ghidorah though holding back and weakened. It's still a feat that no other Titan probably would be able to manage, with the novelization also saying that they were tearing into each other's flesh. So yeah, Mothra would upscale that performance by Rodan. Mothra could also disperse Ghidorah's storms, as shown during her appearance at the Battle of Boston. Ghidorah's storms aren't just his hacks, and yeah, they do scale to his overall power, and it's only a feat that other Alpha Titans such as Kamato's and Godzilla are shown to be able to do. And oh yeah, how could I forget, the novelization also states that she was going to literally kill Ghidorah, which is a feat that speaks for itself. So yeah, even though she has barely any screen time, she has the lore to back up her status as the Queen of the Monsters. Moving on to the 8th wonder of the world, and I know people who like to downplay him so bad, and it's just sad. And yeah, I kind of understand it. Kong did fight a Godzilla that was kind of trolling for the most part and then lost the second he really started to lock in. But here's the thing, Kong was also nerfed during this film, just as Godzilla was. This is true because he's stated to just not be in his prime nor energized due to sitting in a dome for like 4 years. And this sentiment is backed up by Adam Wingard himself. You can add on to this line of thinking because the writer for Kingdom Kong has gone on record to state that the mythology department told her that Kong was exhausted as well as tired by the events of GVK. And I think that Prime Kong is probably the Kong we see during the events of his comic book. You know, the same comic where he was able to beat Kamato's casually when the fight was purely physical, an alpha level threat that can manipulate a portion of Ghidorah's storms. So yeah, Kong was a menace. But anyways, out of shape GVK Kong still has some good stuff that we can use. For starters, while at 50% power, he stated to be stronger than Mechagodzilla. During the events of GVK, he's also an Alpha Titan. And using art book statements, he's praised by GVK's designers for his strength. And it's also said that Kong presented a challenge to Godzilla's rule as the King of the Monsters. Granted, it's a slightly weaker King of the Monsters who's not really going all out, but even though he's not trying, that does not mean he's holding back in any of his blows. Godzilla during all of their fights is trying to kill Kong, let's not get it twisted. He's just not as aggressive as he would be against like Ghidorah, for example. Wingard has gone on record and said that Godzilla's mindset during this battle is, and I quote, he's having fun, and if Kong dies, it's whatever. He's not holding back in his blows or his attacks, he's just not trying too hard to land them. Think of it like Sneeko versus Sean Strickland. Sean was trying to knock out bro, but he wasn't treating the ordeal like it was a serious fight. Unlike Sneeko though, Kong got his hits in. Throughout all of the confrontations in GVK, even without the axe, Kong does pretty well, scaling to a near full power Godzilla, even in situations where he was at a distinctive disadvantage. So yeah, while overall Godzilla is stronger than Kong, it's not like Kong's performance was so bad that he loses to like Rodan, for example. And once you consider the fact that he wasn't even in his base, then yeah, he's pretty good. Overall, of these two Titans, I would say Kong is physically stronger than Mothra, but Mothra would be above Kong if you really take into account her scaling to Ghidorah. But any way you choose, I don't think the gap is too big to the point where, you know, one would one-shot the other. Both have alpha level scaling, and they should upscale all the mid-end titans in their entirety, as well as Mechagodzilla. So yeah, pick your poison with these guys, but moving on to the top 3 now. With the first of these 3 being Muro Prime, truly a monster. For those of you guys who don't know who she is, she's the antagonist for the Godzilla prequel comic, Godzilla Aftershock. I mean, there's not really that much to say. She starts the story nerfed due to her hibernation, but despite this, she was shown to overpower Godzilla multiple times, as well as critically injure him, even going as far as to break the dorsal fins of the King of Monsters. Muro Prime herself is stated to utilize seismic powers in order to beat Godzilla as badly as she does, and she's also stated to test Godzilla like he's never been tested before. Overall, I would have her this high due to scaling to Godzilla for the most part. It's pretty blatantly shown, so that's why this section is coming out to be so quick. So I'll go over some author statements for the moment. While yes, Muro Prime is confirmed to be much weaker than Godzilla, the powers she utilizes are in order to be able to work on other titans, so her not being that strong base is not really like an anti-fee. But as for her base strength, we actually have some implications due to official sources. Drew Johnson, the illustrator for Godzilla Aftershock, has stated that Kong would need a weapon and armor in order to fight Prime, and he's also stated to be able to shatter Mechagodzilla's armor very easily with a casual sonic blow. And seeing as how she did the same to Godzilla's dorsal spikes, it's not really an inconsistent thing to say. So yeah, that's Muro Prime. At number 2 now, we have King Ghidorah. I don't think anyone's gonna disagree with me, but just in case, I'm gonna give y'all a quick rundown of his stats. Ghidorah was a threat so powerful that in beating him in the ancient past, Godzilla had fully cemented himself as the main alpha of the Titans for hundreds of thousands of years. In the King of Monsters novelization, it said that Godzilla wasn't only their best chance of being Ghidorah, but their only chance. Keep in mind, Monarch knew about Titans such as Kong, and this statement is particularly telling. Ghidorah also posed the greatest threat to the Monsterverse at the time, threatening to create a global storm that would virtually destroy the planet. But moving on to some inverse stuff now, Ghidorah, in a state that was much weaker than his base, was able to one-shot Rodan, a mid-tier alpha titan, with a single gravity beam. It's also stated that Ghidorah believed himself to be stronger than Godzilla during the Antarctica battle, and it's not exactly inconsistent or a dumb thing to think, especially seeing as how Ghidorah's gravity beams did drop Godzilla for a decent amount of time, so relativity was established there at the very least. From there, Ghidorah would only become much stronger due to absorbing an electrical grid during the Battle of Boston. We call this Ghidorah supercharged. The multiplier for supercharged Ghidorah isn't really concrete, but we can make some inferences. Ghidorah went from badly losing to a nuclear amp to Godzilla, with the novel saying that Godzilla was ripping apart Ghidorah so fast that Ghidorah could not even regen efficiently because Godzilla would just rip it apart that fast or even faster. With the same novelization actually stating that he was just trying to flat out run away. So it's very telling that upon getting this new power, he was able to drop this same nuclear amped Godzilla with a single barrage of gravity beams, which must have beat him so bad that all he had to do was drop Godzilla for the fight to be pretty much over. This drop right here has been calculated to be around small town level. Seeing as how a base Godzilla can endure forces much greater than this in base, then it's safe to say those gravity beams must have got him really low. This is consistent as the same gravity beams could literally disintegrate Mothra, an alpha level titan who scales pretty high. So yeah, Monster Zero started the film off as a menace, but by the end of his run, he was truly unstoppable. Well, almost. Because as you know, at number 1, the strongest being in the entire Monsterverse is Godzilla. This is pretty obvious as he's the king of the monsters, and he has inverse scaling that gets him above pretty much everyone. He can one-shot most titans while being in a state while he's tired and starving. He's stated to be stronger than the Muro Prime, with the Prior only being able to get the upper hand on him due to her abilities. In the ancient past, it's stated that 3 times he was able to beat Ghidorah in seemingly a 1v1. We know Mothra and Rodan were there aiding Godzilla, but by the time of the final part of the fight, it's safe to say that it was a 1v1. Mostly due to the wording of all 3 of these statements. As previously mentioned, he was stated to be humanity's only hope against Ghidorah, with Ghidorah during the early part of this film, upon fighting Godzilla at Antarctica, realizing that he needed to retreat in order to gather his strength back in order to rival this current Godzilla. I also want to point out that in lore, his atomic breath can also scorch and leave burn marks on Ghidorah as well. By the time of GVK, him and Kong are stated to be the most powerful titans on Earth currently, with Adam Wingard even stating that Godzilla is unstoppable. And for the last piece of inverse, it's said that Godzilla, and more specifically his atomic breath, are the most powerful forces in nature. This is important because Godzilla scales above his atomic breath, as Godzilla could take an axe shot powered by multiple prolonged shots of the same atomic breath to the head and not even be damaged at all, with the author of the novelization saying that the only thing that was hurt during this scene was Godzilla's own internal pride. Like, compare this damage to something like Mechagodzilla and you'll see why he upscales him pretty easily. And here's the craziest part of all these metas: these scale to his base, because as of right now, he has 2 additional forms that drastically increase all of his stats. You guys already know the nuke amp as I went over it during the Ghidorah section, but I didn't talk about about Burning Godzilla, so there's that. Burning Godzilla literally no-sold and was unfazed by an amped Ghidorah's full barrage of prolonged gravity beams, with these same beams being able to atomize Mothra, and weaker beams being previously shown to drop him. So this single feat right here puts Burning Godzilla so much higher than the rest of the Monsterverse that I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I'm not even sure if Evolved Godzilla is gonna be stronger than 2019 Burning, so I'm gonna keep it at that. So I hope that with all that, I've established that Godzilla currently is the ultimate apex titan, and truly a god amongst monsters. It's as the characters say, this is Godzilla's world, we're just living in it. So yeah, that wraps the recap up. It's overall pretty messy at parts, but overall, the main takeaways are pretty consistent. Were you surprised by any of the spots on this list? And in the comments, be sure to tell me where you think the new forms and new tech and new titans will fall post-GXK. As for myself though, I guess like all of you, I'm gonna have to wait and see. But until then, stay big G fans.